It's MSDNC, so I expect nothing less from you clowns. Even today, even 48 hours later, you couldn't wait. You couldn't wait with your lies and with your nonsense. So just get out of here.
During the first day of the Republican National Convention, Donald Trump Jr. exploded when an MSNBC reporter asked a perfectly fair question and was so triggered that he complained about it hours later on Newsmax. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. Yesterday, at the time of recording, was the Republican National Convention, the first day. And there were many interesting, iconic moments. We're going to do another video about another funny one a little bit later. But in this one, Donald Trump Jr., widely seen as the most loyal of Donald Trump's actual children and the one who's still involved with the campaign, Eric to a lesser extent, Ivanka reportedly not involved at all. During the Republican National Convention, he was confronted by an MSNBC reporter who just very politely asked a question about Donald Trump's foreign policy, particularly with respect to the southern border. And Don Jr. did not handle himself very well. He lost his temper and demanded that the MSNBC reporter leave.
About the things that he did, the prosperity he brought, the peace deals that he signed around the world, rather than the disaster that we're living right now. I think you do everyone in the country a big favor.
I know immigration's important to him. I covered the family separation crisis closely. Will we continue to see policies like separating 5,000 children deliberately from their parents?
You mean the Obama administration?
You know they didn't do that, sir.
Okay. Sure.
Will there be a second family separation policy?
It's MSDNC, so I expect nothing less from you clowns. Even today, even 48 hours later, you couldn't wait. You couldn't wait with your lies and with your nonsense. So just get out of here.
The nomination continues here in the Florida delegation. We're about to hear from Eric and Don Jr.
So what's so funny about that, of course, is Donald Trump Jr. is lying. He's like, you know, my father brought prosperity to the world. He created world peace. He sounds very much in cadence and tone like his father. Well, that's not true. There were foreign conflicts going on when Donald Trump was president. The Abraham Accords were wildly overstated. And the prosperity economically that Donald Trump brought to America, most of it he inherited from President Obama. So it's funny that Don Jr. wants to bring up the Obama administration. We'll get to that in just a second. When the economy was doing well under Donald Trump, it was mostly a continuation of Obama-era trends that he inherited. And then, of course, as you know, and Don Jr. likes to forget and perhaps has other reasons to forget, but in his last year in office, Trump presided over an economic catastrophe. Don Jr. doesn't want to talk about that. So then, of course, you know, the MSNBC reporter asked a fair question. He's like, listen, I've covered, you know, situation at the southern border, immigration. You apparently make this a huge part of your campaign, which Republicans have. Is there going to be a continuation of first-term Trump-era policies if Trump is elected to a second term? Now, Don Jr. is so unprepared for that question, he can't handle it. And he can't handle the deflection being debunked or rejected by the MSNBC reporter that he feels the need to evoke the fact that his father suffered an assassination attempt recently. 48 hours later, how can you ask us perfectly fair questions to ask about a man who's running for president? Yeah, but this is what MAGA snowflakes like Don Jr. do. They can't handle scrutiny. They can't handle criticism. You know, he even referred to MSNBC as MSNDC, right? Referring to, again, this idea that it's the Democratic convention, right? But the fact of the matter is, this guy's just doing his job. Imagine how Don Jr. would react if President Biden reacted so harshly to a Fox News question. As a matter of fact, you know, President Biden and Peter Doocy of Fox News have had many lovable frenemy moments, right? And the one time that Biden, you know, kind of insulted Peter Doocy, called him a stupid son of a bitch, he then telephoned him to apologize, and it was widely reported. So just the contrast between the two camps and the two parties with respect to critical media is staggering. But what's also interesting about this is that John Jr. was so upset that hours later, he was still whining about it, this time on Newsmax in his safe space.
Actually, Rob, I dealt with it today on the floor. You know, I'm going onto the floor to help cast the delegates for, you know, with my brother, who's, I guess, the chief delegate from Florida. I was one of them. We throw my father over the ballot, the nomination, and there's a clown there from MSNBC. So does this bring back the vitriol and Trump rhetoric that we experience? I go, wait, like, was it Trump or was it you guys? Because I know Trump created peace. He did peace deals in the Middle East. That was the Holy Grail. He created prosperity. He created jobs. All of that noise, all of the vitriol was created by you guys. You guys peddled Russia, Russia, Russia. Yeah. You called half the country fascists and Nazis and everything else you could call them for 8 years. It was all nonsense. It didn't matter. You guys, it was you guys that did that. Well, what do you say about Trump putting children in cages? I go, oh, you mean the Obama administration cages? Yeah, the Obama administration. That's not true. I mean, we can fact check him in real time because it is true, and everyone knows it.
Again, the fact check in real time is that child separation dramatically increased in the Trump administration and dramatically decreased in the Biden administration. But there again, you want to talk about fact checking. So it's so funny. What Don Jr. just did there was insinuate that somehow Donald Trump has never engaged in irresponsible or divisive or aggressive rhetoric, and that's just a creation of the left. And this is something that we hear a lot in the aftermath of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump by a registered Republican who, according to his classmates, was very conservative. So that really doesn't wash. But again, this idea that, it's actually the left who have been vilifying the opposition. Like this, there's no doubt that there are those of us on the left who are fed up with the MAGA Republican movement and who use blunt language, right? And I have insulted MAGA Republicans on this channel. And again, I make no bones about it. But I don't use violent rhetoric. President Biden doesn't use violent rhetoric. Democrats as a whole collectively don't use violent rhetoric, and certainly not to the same extent that Republicans do. Donald Trump famously in 2016, when he was publicly campaigning for the first time, repeatedly threatened reporters, encouraged his supporters to beat up reporters. He even famously said, and this is something that we forget about, but it's now, circulating again. He went viral when talking about Secretary Hillary Clinton, that if she wins the election, she's going to take your guns and there's nothing you can do about it if she wins the election. And then he adds, well, maybe you Second Amendment people can do something about it, insinuating that if she wins the election, they should assassinate her. President Biden has never said anything like that, to say nothing of what Trump said while he was in office as a sitting president and as a candidate in 2024. He still uses violent rhetoric. He also refers to President Biden as a tyrant, a fascist, a threat to democracy. When Trump was the president in 2020, he said during his speech at the Capitol, or at the Ellipse rather, that his supporters, who he deceived into believing, that the election was stolen, that they should march on the Capitol, because if they don't, you won't have a country anymore, right? So the fact of the matter is that there is a disproportionate representation of violent rhetoric on the right compared to the left, and Don Jr. is simply lying about that. I do want to play actually a couple more clips, starting with this one too. It actually has nothing to do with the Don Jr. part, but it is funny to me because Mitch McConnell, the Republican minority leader in the Senate, and reluctant ally of Donald Trump when Trump was president. I mean, McConnell tried to use him to, cram through every judicial appointment humanly possible so that they could reshape the federal judiciary with young conservative ideologues. But McConnell reportedly hated Trump and disrespected Trump because he thought, understandably so, that Trump's an idiot. And Trump felt the same way about McConnell, that there was like this mutual contempt between these two men. And they didn't speak for years in the aftermath of Trump's presidency. Now, of course, McConnell, being a partisan creature, he will gleefully sacrifice the republic for short-term political advantage, even if he does so reluctantly. You can tell he doesn't like Trump, but at the end of the day, he puts party above country. And so here's McConnell at the RNC, and I want you to note how people react and consider, what has the Republican Party become?
Madam Chairman, the Commonwealth of Kentucky proudly cast 46 votes for the next president, Donald J. Trump.
Yes, some people are cheering, but a lot of people are booing, right? And this is McConnell, offering his delegates, right, to Donald Trump, and he even calls him the next president of the United States. But McConnell is so hated by MAGA cultists because he's seen as insufficiently loyal and too critical of Trump in the past. If anything, they should be celebrating it, right? My God, McConnell bent the knee, as all Republicans do in the end, because, again, party comes before country to Republican politicians. You would think they'd be grateful. I do want to play another clip here, too. The last one, again, is really funny. This is from the first day of the Republican National Convention. This is Eric Trump, Don Jr.'s brother, Donald Trump's other unloved son, referring to his father as the greatest president in history.
And everybody in this great city, on behalf of our entire family and on on behalf of the 125 delegates in the unbelievable state of Florida, we hereby nominate every single one of them for the greatest president that's ever lived, and that's Donald J. Trump.
That's certainly a combination of words. I don't know how impactful they are. It reminded me, and we did a video about this, but presidential scholars, political historians, political scientists of both parties, I mean, they regularly evaluate the accomplishments of presidents going all the way back to President Washington. And during the most recent, a collection of presidential rankings by the relevant experts, Trump was ranked dead last. And it makes sense, right? He has an anemic executive and legislative record. He has corroded democratic norms and institutions, namely the refusal to not only accept elections, but to resist for the first time the peaceful transfer of power. There's really unhinged stuff coming from Eric in this respect. I mean, I understand that that's his son, but it's so bewildering to see the revisionist history coming from MAGA Republicans that not only is Trump a great president, but so many of them think that Trump is the greatest president. Trump himself routinely refers to himself as the greatest president, greater than President Washington and President Lincoln, who are widely considered to be the two best presidents, along with President Roosevelt and others. I mean, I think that President Biden's domestic record has been extraordinary. And if he's the Democratic nominee, I want him to win the election. And I want him to have a successful second term, which of course would require Democrats to take both the House and keep the Senate. But even President Biden is not the greatest president in history, right? I mean, I would never say that because just the record doesn't reflect it, as good as he's been. So just really weird stuff. And that was just day one of the Republican National Convention. I imagine day two, which again at the time of recording is today, is going to get considerably weirder. Let me know what you think in the comments.